Hello, crypto world. Welcome to the Chart Historian. My name is Justin, and on this channel, I delve deep into crypto charts, exploring chart structures, fractals, and patterns. So I came across an interesting observation the other day that I wanted to share with you, and I believe it could help potentially show what is happening right now on the Bitcoin chart. So this is Bitcoin all the way back in 2011. This is where I need to start to build my case. So this peak took place in 2011 as well as this decline. Now, this decline is a pattern B because it does a bounce at the bottom. We are going to be examining pattern B declines. There is a pattern A that instead of doing this bounce here, it does a V bottom. You can find out more about Bitcoin corrective structures here. So, Bitcoin in a correction does, after its initial peak, it comes down and then retraces and does three waves to the bottom. 1, 2, 3. So what I've done here on this chart, I've put a Fibonacci retracement level, but I've done it upside down. So normally this is the bottom of the Fibonacci retracement. I reversed it and put the bottom where the peak is, and I put the 100% retracement level, or the 1 Fibonacci retracement level, at the capitulation point down here. So I've come to an interesting observation. If you measure this distance between the 786 Fibonacci level and the 1 Fibonacci level, it brings some interesting things to light. Let's put on a measurement tool right here. So what is interesting to note here, let's walk through it. So it comes to a peak, comes crashing down. Wave 1 starts, 1. It goes into this zone right here beyond the 786 Fibonacci level, dips down, but it does not go below this 50% line right here. So it pulls back up and hits this trend line. It also hit the trend line up here and here. So it comes back down, and now at the end of wave 2 and the beginning of wave 3, it dips below this 50% line right here. It pulls up and hits this trend line again before coming back down and coming to a capitulation. So at that capitulation, it does a bounce. Now, let's recap. So this trend line, each wave has hit it. It hit it here, it hit it here. On wave 1, on wave 2, it hit it here. On wave 3, it hit it here. At the end of wave 2 and the beginning of wave 3, it dips below the 50% level between the 786 and the 1%, or the 1 Fibonacci retracement level. Now, let's see if this theme continues. And if it does, it potentially could be a guide to tell us where we are and what to expect in the future with today's chart. So let's move forward in history and see what history has to show us. Okay, so now we are in December 2013, where the peak was created and the following decline took place in 2014. Now, again, I put this Fibonacci on in the same way I did the previous one. I also put a trend line going all the way down to the bottom, and as you can see, here is wave 1. It touches, it bottoms out here, it goes below this 0.786 Fibonacci retracement level, it pulls up, hits that trend line again on wave 2, comes back down below the 0.786 Fibonacci retracement level, goes back up, touches it. In fact, here it actually got above it. This is interesting because this could happen again too. Got pulled back in right away, and then eventually came down to hit a capitulation point where it bounced, and it went a tiny bit lower here at the end of this bounce. Okay, so here we have that measurement tool, and as you can see, so here is wave 1. It dips below the 786 and then pulls back up in wave 2, comes crashing down, and here it actually does the same thing. It goes, it doesn't go below much, but it does go below the 50% mark between the 0.786 level and the 1. So, and then it pulls back up, hits that trend line, and comes down to its capitulation point. So we have two instances where pattern Bs with a bounce have done the same thing. There's one other thing I'd like to point out, and this is another potential thing to be aware of. And I made a video about this. If you note here, the previous correction before this one, this is a pattern A. Pattern A is pretty much the same as a pattern B. It comes up, comes crashing down, does 3 bounces to a capitulation point. At that capitulation point, it does a V bottom, after which it moves on into its recovery. If you put a trend line right here at the top of this first retracement, and it doesn't show this on all charts, but if I'm using the Bitcoin US dollar index by TradingView, it shows it on this one. On other ones, this dip is not the same. But here, you notice that when you put that trend line on there, this is where it bottomed out. This is where that capitulation point was. Here it went a tiny, tiny, tiny bit lower than that capitulation point, that line from here. Let's keep an eye on that and see how that compares to today's chart. Okay, so here we are at today's chart, and this is Bitcoin made an initial peak here, came crashing down, retraced, and it is my belief that this is wave 1 and wave 2. Now, I had theorized that this was what we were currently working on right here. Now, you can watch some of my other videos on this, but in a decline, Bitcoin develops a theme, and each theme is unique to each decline. You can go back and watch some of my other videos to find the correlation or what that decline, that theme looks like on this decline. But for a while, I thought this was going to be playing out here, but it was very different. This is very different from this. So then I started to think, well, maybe we are starting wave 3. So wave 1, wave 2, and then this potentially would be wave 3. Now let's put on some of those same metrics that we did on the other two pattern B Bitcoin corrections. So let's put on a Fibonacci retracement level. So we put the bottom part right here at the peak. And so now, where do we place the 1? Or more importantly, why did I place the 1 here? Well, let's do a little further examination. So if you remember on that other one, here's the pattern A where it made a initial peak and then the 3 bounces down to a capitulation point. If you place a trend line here in the same place where the previous Bitcoin correction capitulated, that would be essentially at this point right here. So let's put a trend line right there. So, okay, that's one possibility. So I aligned it there. Now, there's another reason why I have placed the potential capitulation point right here. And that is if you put a 100-month moving average on here, it also aligns with this line as well right here. This is historically a place where Bitcoin has capitulated. This is the next strongest moving average that we have. I believe this is the moving average to keep an eye on. So if we say that this is the bottom, that bottom would be where Bitcoin would find a capitulation point would be $11,772, around there. It would then do a bounce, and when it returns from that bounce, there is a chance that it can go a little bit below that. And then from there on, it would move on to its recovery. So let's put a trend line on here and see how that looks. All right, so here we are with wave 1. It comes up, touches the trend line, comes crashing down, comes back up in wave 2. It touches the trend line here, comes crashing down, all the way to here. Wave 2 would end here. Now, where does that compare with if we measure this distance from the 786, the 0.786 Fibonacci retracement level and the 1? So let's put on a measurement tool and see what that would look like. So remember, the other two at the beginning, at the end of wave 2 and the beginning of wave 3 went below this. And what does it do? It goes below. So that potentially tells me that we might be actually starting wave 3. This is historically in line with what has happened in the past with pattern B corrections. But now, what about this thing right here? Should we just sweep that under the rug? Or could this have potentially already played out? Well, if we zoom into this right here on an hour chart, and I'm going over here to CoinTrader Pro. So if you take this fractal right here, this pattern, and shrink it down and compare it here, you can see that structurally it's similar. So you have, this is on a more vertical axis, this one's on a more horizontal axis, but it's kind of the same choppiness, and then all of a sudden you get that one peak, two peak, and then a crash. So one peak, and it even has this little part right here and right there, and then this one goes up. This one is a split peak. If you look at this one close enough, you'll see that it also has two parts to that peak. This cleaved in half almost, and then went sideways and dropped. So that potentially could be what this is, just on a smaller scale. The reason why I compared it to this fractal right here is because during a Bitcoin correction, Bitcoin produces a theme, a repetitive theme that takes place. So that would be in keeping with what Bitcoin does during a decline. So this is repeated here in that case. So what would validate this idea? What I would look for is a shoot up to this trend line here. It may go past it briefly, but come back in. That would be a validation of this. Now, what would invalidate this idea? Well, if it dropped and never touched this, because historically speaking, it's the third wave has always touched this trend line. So if we see a drop without touching this, I would start to think that maybe this is just playing out bigger down here. So that would, to me, in my mind at least, invalidate this whole idea. And we would have to wait for it to do the same thing again. But there's not much room for a third wave. If it drops and then does it again, it can work. It's just going to be a smaller wave. So historically speaking, they've always touched this trend line starting, and I've always started at the same place, at the retracement from this peak. So this trend line is historically accurate to all the other ones. Well, I hope this video was helpful. If you found it helpful, it'd be appreciated if you hit that thumbs up button and that subscribe button. You'll be notified if you hit that subscribe button of when I put out new content. And by the way, I am not a financial advisor, so none of this should be considered financial or investment advice. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you catch my next one. Have a great day, and bye for now.